This forest north of Warsaw holds a secret, a little-known chapter of the Holocaust. Michael Zev Gordon only recently learned that his grandfather was murdered here by the Nazis.
I came here in September 2022 with two of my sons in this extraordinary silent forest, and I came here to find something out about my grandfather, who was shot here in summer 1941, a story I knew nothing about because my family never talked about it.
Zalman Gorodecki, Gordon's grandfather, is one of about 1,500 Jews who were shot and buried in mass graves near the Polish village of Sumowo by German forces, a victim of what's been called the Holocaust by bullets. Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union in the summer of 1941. In the occupied regions, mobile killing units soon began systematically shooting Jewish men, women and children. In all, more than 1.5 million Jews lost their lives in these mass executions.
It's believed that about a quarter of all Holocaust victims were killed in mass shootings. Not in concentration and extermination camps, but in or near the towns where they lived.
In many cases, Magdalena Sariusz-Wolska says these murders took place in full view or at least within earshot of the local population. Yet many details of these mass shootings remain unknown. The German Historical Institute in Warsaw is conducting a project to study the locations where these executions took place and their post-war history.
Unfortunately, there are many places where there is no remembrance at all, where the mass graves haven't even been identified. And where they have been identified, where the location is known, and there may be a monument or a memorial plaque, it's mostly locals keeping the memory alive.
One of these initiatives also helped Michael Zev Gordon find his grandfather's final resting place.
There is no Jewish cemetery in Szumowo. They were buried.
Thanks to the Polish organization Zapomniane, Polish for forgotten, a memorial stone now commemorates the 1941 massacre. The NGO has already located and secured hundreds of mass graves from the Holocaust.
On the top of this hexagon shape.
But I didn't.
We need to follow Jewish law in terms of dealing with Jewish burials, so we can't use the traditional archaeology. We can't open graves, we can't dig out the bones. We can only use the tools of the so-called non-invasive archaeology.
Zapomniane uses ground-penetrating radar and other techniques to locate the graves. This is followed by commemorative work and analysis, often in collaboration with the German Historical Institute. The organization also relies on the memories of the local population, which has been involved in the process from the very beginning.
Our stories are very personal. They are personal for us and they are personal for local communities. Because still we meet people whose grandparents used to remember those Jews, whose grandparents used to be in the same bench at school with those people. We dream that the place that we will at some point commemorate will become the part of their local history, because this is their history, it's not ours.
For British composer Michael Zev Gordon, the trip to Poland 3 years ago marked the beginning of a deeply personal journey, an experience he processes through his music.
In the last 18 months I've written a piece of music called A Kind of Haunting, and in it I try to work through these things, and particularly memories that were surrounded by silence. I grew up with so much silence, but I wanted to find out. And somehow, by being here, by making this connection, it's all the more possible, and for me it's a vital thing to be able to pass this on to the next generation. I'm his grandchild, but I can pass it on to my children. And so somehow his story moves forward. He's not forgotten.
How can we today, 80 years after the end of the Nazi regime, keep that historical memory alive? In Germany, a group of students has begun that journey by learning the story of a pupil who used to sit in their own classrooms. And we also met Ingeborg Geisler, who survived the Holocaust and told us about the everyday cruelties of Nazi society that are hard to imagine today.
For these students, this Holocaust project has become personal. That's because a former student of their school was murdered by the Nazis 82 years ago. Werner Spandau was persecuted by the Nazi regime and imprisoned in several concentration camps because he stood up to fascism. Now they're learning about his story. The highlight of the project was installing a stumbling stone in front of Werner Spandau's former home in Berlin.
At first, I didn't realize that I was reading and learning about a story about people that really happened. But then I understood, yes, this really happened.
Ingeborg Geisler is a Holocaust survivor. She's looking through pictures as she tells her story. Her mother had this photo taken of her when she was about 9 years old to convince the authorities that the way Ingeborg looked didn't fit the Nazis' racist ideology.
I don't know if my mother explained to me what she needed the picture for. I can't say. But later, of course, I realized it. And then I have to admit, I also looked at the photo to see if there was anything about me that looked Jewish. I didn't find anything.
Ingeborg's father was Jewish and her mother was Christian. Her father was able to emigrate to China, but her mother tried to remain inconspicuous. Ingeborg Frank, as she was called back then, stayed with her aunt and uncle in a small town in eastern Germany.
I was the only one in Marbach who had to wear a star. There was a teacher there named Möbis, who was the local leader of the Nazi party. And he made it clear to the children that they could do whatever they wanted with Inge Frank. I was an outcast. And children can be very cruel.
In 1941, she was banned from attending school, something that hurt her deeply. In January 1945, she was transported to the Theresienstadt concentration camp. A local police officer had tricked her by saying that she would be able to attend school there.
There on the train, when I told others what the local policeman had told us, the adults said that it was all a big mistake. We would be killed. We are going to our deaths.
Ingeborg wrote a postcard to her aunt and uncle and threw it out of the train window. By some miracle, the card was delivered.
Dear aunt, dear uncle, I'm fine. It's all a lie. I'm not coming back.
But Ingeborg did come back. Unlike Werner Spandau and 6 million Jews who became victims of the Holocaust. The students want to know how this could have happened. We delivered their questions to Ingeborg Geisler.
Did you expect it before it all happened, or did you somehow see it coming?
There were many intellectuals, highly educated people, scholars and so on, who stayed in Germany because they thought, well, it couldn't get that bad. But it got worse.
What was it like after the war, when things started to get back to normal and people went back to school? How were Jewish people treated then?
As someone persecuted by the Nazi regime, I was very well looked after in the former East Germany. But officially, there wasn't any interest in what happened. I've spoken to relatives from West Germany who went to school after the Second World War, and they said these things weren't part of their history classes either.
Da haben diese Dinge im Geschichtsunterricht auch keine Rolle gespielt.
She's been talking to young people about the Nazi era and her childhood for over 30 years, to keep history from repeating itself. The students are worried about Germany's political climate, its parallels to the past, and the shift to the right.
You get a bit scared when you watch the news. And also TikTok. There are always things where foreigners are being targeted by hate, and I think that's kind of stupid.
That's why the students want to continue telling the story of Werner Spandau. They want to ensure no one forgets Germany's reign of terror under the Nazi regime.